Yeah. Yeah, well, that conversation about debt too is one of the ways that you cooperate and negotiate with your spouse and your friends, your family for that matter, is also to jointly develop something like a joint vision, because you might be able to sit down with your wife and say, well, look, if we could have the dinner times that we really wanted, if they were optimal, like you've done with your son, let's say, what would that look like? Well, let's say you have a couple of kids. You think, well, do we all want to sit down together as a family? This has to be a question, right, to both of you.
Yes.
That you're actually imagining. Do we all want to sit down? Okay, yes. Well, how often? Do we want to do that like 7 nights a week? Is this something that's actually a crucial foundation for our family? Or can we do it 5 nights a week and maybe do something different on Friday? And you think, well, do all those micro things have to be negotiated? And the answer is, those aren't micro things. You do that every day. They're absolutely foundational. And then you want to hear what the other person has to say, because if you don't, they're not going to be fully on board. Plus, they might have a better idea than you. You never know. It's like, so let's say we decide, well, we're going to have dinner together at 6 o'clock, 5 nights a week. And we're going to let people forage 1 night a week and maybe sit in front of the TV, and we're going to go out 1 night a week, something like that. And we'll try that for a while. And then the next question is, well, what would we like to serve? And who's going to cook? And who's going to clean up? And if we wanted it to go as well as it possibly could, how are we going to get the kids involved? And do we want to experiment with some new foods? And that meal time, if that's the evening meal, let's say that's 90 minutes. That's more than 1/10 of your day. And so that's 10% of your life. That's literally 10% of your life. If you get the evening meal
but it's
right.
bigger. It's compound interest. That grows over time. I think that you take care, it's like putting 15% of your income in retirement. It grows to infinitely more than 15% of your income over time, right? So if you take care of that 10%, it's not just taking care of that 10%. Suddenly, if your marriage is in sync, you're an infinitely better parent,
right?
Infinitely better citizen, infinitely better worker, and it becomes very recursive. The famed psychiatrist William Glasser, he gave me. I love this analogy. He says that his famed line was, he could fix any marriage in 2 sessions, and he said, "We think in pictures, but we speak in words." And if couples can simply align their pictures, then you get a very clear path. So when my wife comes to me on a Monday and says, hey, this weekend, you and me, we're gonna go on the hottest date. And then she just walks away. Monday night, I'm wondering where we're going. Tuesday night, I'm wondering what I'm wearing and for how long, right? By Wednesday and Thursday, I'm wondering who's gonna keep the kids, and I don't care because they're gonna be fine, and what hotel we're gonna end up at. And then Saturday comes along, and I show up in a suit, and she shows up in her running shorts and a t-shirt. And I say, what are you doing? And she says, what are you doing? And I say, I thought we were going on a hot date. And she says, it's seven tacos for $10 down at Taco Hut. We're going on a hot date. Hey, I love tacos, and I hope she loves the occasional rendezvous, but we both used the word date, and we had very different pictures. Now I'm upset, she's upset, and so in my house, every single day of the week, every day I'm not on the road, we ask ourselves this question: hey, what's the picture of today look like? It's just become a vernacular in our home. And so when she says, I need some space this evening, I need some time by myself, I tend to go, okay, cool. After dinner and after the kids and after you're done writing and I won't hassle you for the last 8 minutes of the day. For her, she's thinking, the moment you walk in this house, I'm out and I might come back in a week, right? We just have to align our pictures, and I'm cool either way and she's cool either way. It's just managing those expectations and being so clear with one another.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the process of defining a shared vision. And one of the things that's lovely about that is it makes you're not reactive then. So you're not the thing that's being chased by the monster or the dread. You're the thing that's actively conceptualizing the manner in which the future is going to shape itself. And what you have is the delightful opportunity to share a joint vision that in principle would be better for both of you than anything you could do alone. Like you said, that all the data shows that one of the best things you can do in your life to maximize your long-term health and increase your probability of at least some joy is to have a functional, long-term, intimate relationship. And so you have to attend to that. And a huge part of that is the development of these shared visions. And it's really useful to develop microvisions. And so, we just talked
What would you tell clients back in the day when they would come to you and they'd have a 3-year-old and they would have they have an infant, they have child number 2, and they would say, we're not having sex anymore. We have like an intimacy, we become co-managers of our house. And your response as a clinical psychologist would be, you've got to schedule it. You got to put it on the calendar. And the response always is, I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah, what's the
follow-up?
That's a great question. Well, my first response is, well, how often do you want to have sex? And people hate that. People hate that question. And so they avoid it. They say, well, we don't really want to be that calculating about it. It's like, okay, right, whatever. We're going to parameterize this. Once a year. It's like, no, that's probably too little. Okay, 15 times a day. It's like, no, that's probably too much. Okay, so now we got some parameters here. It's somewhere between once a year and 15 times a day. Let's see if we can narrow that in. And this does make people uncomfortable, right? They don't want to specify their needs and wants. And I think it's
what's the source of that discomfort? Where does that come from?
I think they're embarrassed that they need anything. Right? So it's just fundamental shame. Like it's that same exposure of nakedness. And then they're unwilling to share the information with their partner because it's revealing. And then they're afraid they're going to be rebuffed. And they're afraid they're going to get into a fight. They've got lots of reasons not to want to do it. And
that rolls back to those stories that have been haunting them since they were kids, right?
Yeah. And they don't want to have the difficult conversation up front. And so we might say, well, okay, let's be reasonable about this. It's going to be some number of times a week. You guys have jobs, you have kids, you're busy. You're not going to have a hot date every night. You just don't have time for it. And so why don't we be reasonable about it? We could let's aim for something like twice a week. It's like, can you think? Or maybe we could start with once a week. Because once is a lot more than 0. It's a lot more than 0. Right. And so then you think, well, all right. And then they say something like, well, we did all that dating when we were dating and now we don't want to do that anymore. It's like, okay, so what are you saying here exactly? You're saying that you don't want any more romance and you don't want any more hot sex and you don't want to put any work into it. And it's just going to happen magically, even though it's clearly not happening. That's your theory. And then let's run that theory out. Okay, so now you have new kids, and it's going to be like that for a few years, maybe till they're 10 or 11. You're going to be occupied with your family. And so now you have a sexless marriage with no intimacy for a decade. So what does that look like in like 2032 when you're in divorce court?
Right.
How's that?
Or you're recovering from some addiction, right?
Right. So
of work or of alcohol or whatever it is, because your body's got to meet that need somewhere, and if it can't get it a true deep connection, it will come up with all kind of cheap substitutes, right?
Yeah, like an affair.
That's right.
Yeah. So of course you don't want to do this because it requires difficult negotiation. But how would you like to have your marriage deteriorate into hell over a 10-year period? How does that sound as an alternative? It's like, well, that's not very good. It's like, okay, so which of these two things are you more afraid of? And then when people really think that through, they think, oh yeah, well maybe, I could take the risk of making what I want known. And then, okay, so now you specify it. Well, a date, which night, how long? Are you going to find a babysitter? Are you going to do this every week? Who's going to be responsible for what in relationship to this date? All these details have to be negotiated. And then we remember, by the same logic that we've already employed, if this is 2 hours a week, then that's 15% of one day. That's another 5% of your life. And it's the intimate part of your life. And if you got that right, my God, you might be a much happier person. And so that's another one of the only 25 things you have to take care of to set your life up. But I mean, you said, why are people afraid to do this? They're afraid to show their vulnerability, man. They don't trust their partner. They don't know how to negotiate. They don't even know what they want themselves, Like, it's not that easy for someone to admit that they need any physical attention at all, even though everyone obviously does. Because you're putting yourself on the line then. And that is the definition of intimacy in some sense.